Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for common sense and no BS? Welcome to the Jim Harrington Show, the greatest show on earth. A literal symphony of intelligent discussion and insights that will brighten your day and make you smarter. 100% guaranteed. And now, here's your host, Jim Harrington.
Hi, I'm Jim Harrington. Welcome back to the Jim Harrington Show, otherwise known as the greatest show on earth. As promised, today's show is about inflation. I picked inflation because inflation affects everybody. People are complaining about how much groceries cost and how much gas costs. I'm not happy about it either. It sucks. Stuff's expensive. Remember, after you watch this episode, you'll be more informed and smarter than about 98% of the 340 million people in the whole freaking country. So watch it to the end. It's worth it. All of our IQs are going to go up, I promise. You're going to like this. You ready for your IQ to go up, Liam? Liam's my producer. He already thinks he's pretty smart, but I'm pretty sure we can bring up Liam's IQ today, if you know what I mean. He's laughing. Okay, let's go. Inflation is when prices go up and you can't buy the same amount for your dollar. You go to the grocery store and the stuff you bought a year ago for $100 is $110 today. That's inflation. Inflation can be caused by a lot of things. Prices can go up because of more demand. If everybody wants to buy a Taylor Swift ticket and there's only a limited number of tickets to go around, guess what? People are going to start paying more. They'll bid the price up. People are paying thousands of dollars for a Taylor Swift ticket. Liam paid $1,000 for his Taylor Swift ticket. He says it's totally worth it. Prices can also go up because the raw materials used to make things went up. If half the wheat crop in the United States is destroyed in a bad storm, the price of wheat would go up because there's less of it to go around. What do you think would happen to the price of bread, which is made from wheat? It'd go up. A famous economist named Milton Friedman said, "Inflation is caused by too much money chasing after too few goods. Inflation is bad because it makes you poorer. Think of my earlier example going into the grocery store and the stuff you bought a year ago for $100 is $110 today, 10% more. If you didn't get a 10% raise, you are literally poorer. You can't buy as much. Inflation can eat into your retirement savings too, your 401k or your IRA or pension, which are usually invested in the stock market. If the stock market goes up 10%, but inflation goes up 7%, you really only made 3% because inflation nibbled away at your gains like a termite. Remember the pictures from Germany after World War I where people were taking wheelbarrows full of money down to buy a loaf of bread? That's hyperinflation. Venezuela had hyperinflation too. They had 250% inflation in 2016. Now that sounds really bad, but it gets worse. In 2018, Venezuela had 63,000% inflation. Now that's inflation. What would 63,000% inflation even look like? A $4 loaf of bread would inflate to $52 in just a week. And wait for it, a year from now would be $2,500. A loaf of bread. That's probably why they're eating all the stray cats and dogs down there in Caracas. Cheaper than bread. Our inflation today isn't as bad as that, but it is the worst inflation we've seen in over 40 years. Milton Friedman also said, "Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon." Okay, so inflation happens all the time, just about every year. So what's the big deal? Inflation happens under every president. Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden. They all had inflation. Prices went up under every single one of them. So why all the complaining now? It's because inflation has been unusually high in the last 3.5 years. Remember on Sesame Street how they used to sing that song, "One of these things is not like the others. One of these things just doesn't belong. Sorry, I never claimed to be a singer. Anyway, they'd sing that song and you had to pick out the thing that was different. Let's play that game with inflation under the last 5 presidents. Can you pick out the one that's not like the others, the one that doesn't belong? Well, the one that's not like the others is inflation under Biden. And this is just human nature. That's usually how we look at things and figure things out. We compare one thing to another, just like on Sesame Street. If I told you that that in the 20 years before January 2021, when President Biden took office, the annual 12-month inflation rate reported by the government every month was typically about 2% per year, but since 2021, it's been over 5%, you'd be like, yeah, that's different. That's the one that doesn't belong. In June 2022, inflation hit a high of 9.1%. We'd have to go back almost 41 years to see inflation that high, all the way back to November 1981 when inflation hit 9.6%. 1981 is the year Prince Charles married Lady Diana. That's the year MTV premiered. The point is, that was a long time ago. You remember those things, Liam? Nope. Again, that's how we usually look at things. We compare one thing to another to make choices. Let's compare Biden inflation to Trump inflation. Inflation started increasing after Biden came into office and reached that 41-year high of 9.1% in June 2022. In comparison, the all-time high for inflation during the Trump years was just 2.9%. By the way, if you're wondering, these numbers are all from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS, just so you know where I got them from. And I only took it through June 2024 because that's the last time they put the numbers out. And let's clear something else up that's been in the news. President Biden said a couple of times that inflation was 9% when he came into office. That isn't true. CNN, of all networks, put out a fact check on this in May. This is what they said. The year-over-year inflation rate in January 2021, the month of President Biden's inauguration, was about 1.4%. The Biden era inflation rate did peak at about 9.1%, but that peak occurred in June 2022 after Biden had been president for more than 16 months. Let's check that graph again. Yep, when Biden came into office, inflation was just 1.4%, not 9% like he claimed, just like CNN said in their fact check. Thank you, CNN. Even a stop clock gets it right a couple times a day. Why did inflation go up so much? There's lots of factors, but the big cause is all the money that the government shoveled into the economy since March 2020 when COVID hit. The amount of money we spent is staggering. All these numbers are in billions. The ones in red at the top are the ones from 2020, the year of COVID, fondly remembered by, well, nobody. The first big one was the CARES Act, second from the top up there. It was passed in March 2020, and it alone cost $2,100 billion. That's the same as $2.1 trillion. Then there was the American Rescue Plan at $1,900 billion, and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act at $1,200 billion. And the one that sort of makes me laugh, the completely ironically named Inflation Reduction Act, at $1,045 billion, more than $1 trillion. How much money is all that? It's hard to get your mind around it, isn't it? Let's say you're 6 feet tall. If you stack up dollar bills to 6 feet, that'd be around $17,000. You could buy a car with that. If you stack dollar bills up to be the length of a football field, you'd have to stack up $840,000. Now that's real money. You could buy 3 or 4 houses with that. But let's keep going. The distance from my place in Ohio to Disney World in Florida is about 1,200 miles. If I stacked dollar bills up until it was 1,200 miles high, I'd have to stack up almost $18 billion. That's a lot of money. We're talking Elon Musk money now. But that's only $18 billion. Since COVID in 2020, we've spent almost $8,500 billion. If you stacked up $8,500 billion, the stack would be 580,000 miles high. I would have to drive my car from my house in Ohio to Disney World in Florida and back 240 times to be a stack that high. Over 22 million people lost their jobs when we shut everything down for COVID. Now, you can disagree with whether we actually needed to shut everything down. Looking back, maybe we probably didn't need to, but that's the subject of another show. The fact is that we did shut everything down and people needed help. So we spent a lot of money on COVID in 2020 under President Trump, about $3.5 trillion. But under Biden, inflation ballooned. Why? By December 2020, we had regained almost 12.5 million of those COVID jobs we lost. Things were on the upswing. We were finally coming out of COVID, but we kept on spending like a drunk sailor. As a matter of fact, we've spent more since COVID than we did on COVID. In 2020, during COVID, we spent the $3.5 trillion. After 2020, in the last 3.5 years, we've spent an additional $5 trillion. And I'm not saying that Trump spending $3.5 trillion during COVID didn't contribute to inflation. It probably did. But continuing to spend even more after we were already coming out of COVID and the economy was already recovering, that was like throwing gas on a fire. And that, in a nutshell, is what lit your grocery bill on fire and just about everything else. So it's not some big mystery why inflation ballooned to record levels. It's not even worthy of a Nancy Drew mystery novel. She'd have solved that one in the first page. Liam could solve that one. Let's do story time. About a year ago, I was talking to a woman who is really smart and really successful. She said to me, "I don't get it. They keep telling us that inflation is coming down. But when I go to the grocery store, food isn't coming down. Nothing's coming down." What she didn't understand is that the inflation rate measures how quickly things are increasing in price. Even though the inflation rate is down, prices are still going up, just not as fast. This is what inflation looks like from January of 2021, when Biden took office, to June of this year. Everything that cost $1 in January 2021 cost $1.14 by the end of 2022 and $1.21 by June 2024. See those red dashed lines? Those red dashed lines represent the speed that prices were increasing. Here's those same red dashed lines again. There's a car going 90 miles an hour, there's a car going 45 miles an hour, and there's a car going 30 miles an hour. Even though the car going 30 miles an hour is going a lot slower than the car going 90 miles an hour, both cars are still moving forward, just at different speeds. That's just like inflation. The inflation rate has come down. It's come down from 9% to 3%, but the prices are still going up. The car is still moving forward, just not as fast. And that's what my very smart, very successful friend didn't understand. The prices of her groceries aren't coming down. They just aren't going up as fast. Now let's talk about your paycheck. When economists talk about real wages, they just mean when your paycheck takes inflation into account. The economists call this spending power. Under Trump, real wages, your paycheck spending power, increased 7%. That means that every dollar that was in your paycheck when Trump took office in 2017 could buy $1.07 worth of stuff when Trump left office in 2020. Your paycheck spending power increased under Trump. Your real wages went up. You could buy more stuff with your paycheck even after inflation took its bite. You literally got a raise. Under Biden, your spending power went down. You got a pay cut. You can buy less stuff with your paycheck because inflation is eating up your spending power, again, like a little termite. Let's look at what this means for the typical American household. The typical American household had about $67,000 in income in 2020, but inflation has gone up 21% since then. The typical American household now, in June 2024, needs to make over $81,000 just to keep up with the inflation of the last 3.5 years. That's an extra $14,000 a year, or about $1,160 every month, just to keep up with inflation. The sad, hard truth is that if you didn't get at least 21% in raises over the last 3.5 years, I haven't, you're poor. This is why so many people are struggling to pay for groceries and gas, and it seems like everything else. Let's talk about groceries. Remember I told you that inflation increases under every president? Well, the cost of food, groceries, they increased under Trump. The price of food under Trump increased by 9%. That's not good. But wait, under Biden, the cost of food increased 22%. Yikes. Energy costs are even worse. You know, your electric bill and your gas bill for your house, the cost of filling up your car's gas tank, those are energy costs. The cost of energy did go up under Trump, but just a little. Energy costs went up 2.5%, which is almost nothing. In Biden's 3.5 years in office, so far, energy costs have gone up 45%. So it's not your imagination when you pay your electric bill or heating bill every month and you grit your teeth. Energy prices have increased a crazy amount under Biden. I'm going to do another episode about energy specifically, so keep watching. And if you like what you see in this episode, like the video and hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out. Did I say that right, Liam? Like and subscribe? He's giving me the thumbs up. Now, 3 big things that most people have to worry about is paying for food, your car, and your house. So for food, let's just talk breakfast, my personal favorite meal of the day. In the last 3.5 years, the cost of breakfast and every other meal has gone up. But let's just take a look at breakfast alone. Here's some stuff we usually eat for breakfast: milk, bacon, coffee, cereal, sausage, juice, bread for toast, butter for the toast, and eggs. Everything's up a lot. Sausage, right there in the middle, is up 24%. Over there on the right, though, butter and eggs are up 34 and 39%. That's crazy. Eggs. How much did the cost of breakfast go up under Trump? Well, a lot less. Sausage went up 11% in the Trump years. Butter and eggs only went up 6 and 4%, though. That's not too bad. Coffee actually went down, and that's a very good thing for me. I drink a lot of coffee. Cereal was pretty much unchanged, didn't go up at all. In general, the price of fixing breakfast went up a lot more under Biden than under Trump. How about the cost of driving your car? Cost of driving your car has literally skyrocketed under Biden. New and used cars and trucks are way up, so are tires, getting your car serviced, repairs, and car insurance. Car insurance is just nuts. It's up 55%. If you think about it, that sort of makes sense, though. The cost of repairs are way up, 41%, so insurance companies have to charge more because they'll have to pay more to get your car fixed when you're in an accident. Theft and vandalism and other crime is also up in some areas. So insurance companies, again, have to charge more because they'll have to pay more to fix it when your car gets its window busted out in a break-in or if it gets stolen. And on top of that, there's a lot more people driving without insurance. They take a chance on not getting in an accident or getting their car stolen, and they just drive without insurance and figure somebody else will just pay for it if they get in a wreck. And then what happens? Insurance companies charge more for the people who do have insurance. Put that graph back up. Look over there on the right. The one that most of us just hate is how much gas costs. Filling up your tank in June 2024 is 60% more than what it cost in January 2021. So if it cost you $40 to fill up your gas tank in January 2021, it now costs you $64 to fill up your tank. And if you fill up your tank every week, that's almost an extra $100 a month just to pay for gas. That hurts. Car-related inflation under Trump was much less. Regular gas actually went down 2% under Trump, as opposed to up 60% under Biden. And all of those other things, tires, service, repairs, insurance, those other things went up under Trump, but not nearly as much. Then there's the cost of running your house. House bills like utilities and garbage pickup and even cleaning products are also way up since January 2021. The biggest increases are, again, for energy over there on the right. Gas for cooking or heating your house is up 26%. Electricity is up 32%. Let's compare. Household costs were up under Trump too, but not as much. Energy costs, gas for cooking and heating your house, went up only 8% compared to 26% under Biden. And electricity went up only 6% under Trump compared to 32% under Biden. And while we're talking about housing costs, what about the cost of the house itself? People who are trying to buy a house, especially younger people who want to buy their first house, are really struggling. They can't afford a house with the price of everything else up too. It's just too much. Let's take a look at the cost of getting into that first house. I live in Ohio, so I'm going to use house prices in Ohio as an example. Shout out to my fellow Ohioans. Liam is waving his hand. What's happening in Ohio with house prices is pretty close to what's happened on average across the country on a percentage basis. The average house in Ohio in January 2021 cost $180,000. But by June 2024, that was up to $235,000. People have to save up 20% for their down payment on a house, and then they get a mortgage for the rest. The increase of the average house in Ohio from $180,000 to $235,000 over the last 3.5 years means that their 20% down payment went from $36,000 to $47,000. That's up $11,000. So you have to save up an extra $11,000 for your down payment just to get in the door. But it actually gets worse. After saving up that extra $11,000 for your down payment, you got a mortgage payment to pay every month. Mortgage rates, the interest rates that banks charge for home loans, have more than doubled in the last 3.5 years. In January 2021, the 30-year mortgage rate was 2.7%. But by June 2024, it was 6.9%. That's 2.5 times as much. That family trying to buy an average price home in Ohio in January 2021 would have had a monthly mortgage payment of $733. In June 2024, that same Ohio family trying to buy an average priced house would have a $1,541 mortgage payment, an additional $808 every month. Now, nobody's really got good numbers on this, but according to CBS News, the number of kids, young adults, moving back in with mom and dad is probably the highest number since the 1940s. Bloomberg News says it's the highest number since the Great Depression. A lot of my friends have older kids or even adult children, like up to 30, 35 years old, living with them. Is it any wonder that kids, even adult kids, are moving back in with mom and dad? They can't buy a house because the down payment alone is up $11,000, and the monthly mortgage payment has more than doubled from just 3.5 years ago. You'd think they'd just rent an apartment or something, right? But rent is up too, over 22% under Biden. Rent was only up 12% under Trump. But young adults today also have the inflation on everything else to pay for, so a lot of them are just throwing up their hands and saying, I can't afford food, I can't afford gas, I can't afford rent. Time to move in with mom and dad. Finally, let's talk about your retirement savings. A lot of people say the stock market's been great under Biden. It's been okay. But sometimes these same folks claim the stock market did better under Biden than Trump, which is absolutely not true when we take into account, you guessed it, inflation. I think you're picking up that inflation ruins just about everything by now. In the first 42 months of Trump's presidency, the U.S. stock market was up 36%. In the first 42 months of Biden's presidency, again, this is through June 2024, just like everything else we've talked about, the U.S. stock market was up 42%. Well, look at that. 42% for Biden, 36% for Trump. Biden wins, right? But hold your horses. You remember how I said inflation can eat into your retirement savings, your 401k or your IRA or your pension, things that are usually invested in the stock market? For instance, if the stock market goes up 10% and the inflation goes up 7%, you really only made about 3% because inflation ate away 7% of those gains, just like a little termite. When inflation is counted into the mix, who did better for your retirement savings, Trump or Biden? It completely flips. The high inflation under Biden took a really big bite out of those 42% gains, chomped it all the way down to 18%. Inflation during the Trump years ate away at his gains too. But since inflation was much lower under Trump, it only nibbled away a little, from 36% down to 28%. The fact is your retirement savings did a lot better under Trump, a 28% gain, than with Biden, an 18% gain, once you gave inflation its cut. And I know what you're thinking. This is just some kind of an accounting trick where I'm trying to make the numbers come out to make Trump win. Not even. This is reality. This is the same idea if inflation went up 10%, but you only got a 3% raise. Hey, you got a raise, but you're still in a hole. You're literally 7% poorer. How about we take a look at Trump's full term instead of just the first 42 months of it? Wait for this. Remember how I said that by December 2020, the end of Trump's term in office, when we were finally coming out of COVID, things were getting better, and the economy was recovering, and the stock market was rallying. By the end of Trump's term, the U.S. stock market was up 65%. And even after inflation took its bite, it was still up 53%. Now that translates into an 11% gain, actually more than an 11% gain in your retirement savings every year during the Trump years, even after inflation took its bite. So far under Biden, the stock market, and thus your retirement savings, are up, what did we say, 18% after inflation took its bite? That's less than 5% per year. Actually, it's just 4.7%. So when somebody says on TV that the stock market is better during Biden than Trump, this is what you say. Inflation, after inflation took its bite, like a termite, the stock market and my retirement savings did way better under Trump than Biden. It's a fact. Then throw a beer can at the screen. To wrap up, the high inflation in the last 3.5 years is something we haven't seen in almost 41 years, since MTV came out in 1981. It's not your imagination that your groceries and your gas and just about everything else is more expensive. It's not your imagination that a lot of people have to dip into their savings or even their retirement savings or max out their credit cards just to keep up. And the thing that was like throwing gas on the fire that made inflation so bad was the crazy spending that we did since COVID. And even after COVID, when we were finally coming out of COVID and the economy was already recovering, we doubled down and spent even more. I hate to break this to you, but this was mostly a self-inflicted wound. A lot of people, smart people, warned that all the crazy stimulus packages and the spending was going to cause inflation. There's a guy named Larry Summers. He was the Treasury Secretary under Clinton and the Director of the National Economic Council under Obama. He said way back, before this all got out of hand, there is a chance that macroeconomic stimulus on a scale closer to World War II levels than normal recession levels will set off inflationary pressures of a kind we have not seen in a generation. Larry Summers got pummeled in the media for saying these things and for refusing to bend the knee to the narrative that the White House wanted to project, that everything was hunky-dory, that inflation was transitory. In other words, it would just fade away, that we could just keep on spending like a drunk sailor. But he was right. And a lot of other smart people were sounding the alarm bells too. They just got shouted down. And that's too bad because we're all poorer because of it. And with that, that's the end of episode 2 of the Jim Harrington Show. I hope you liked it. Now you know what inflation is, you know what caused inflation, And you know why all your adult children, all your adult kids are moving back in with you. You know that food, like breakfast, are way more expensive. You know that Trump's stock market was much better for your retirement savings than Biden after inflation took its termite bite. Even the famous rapper 50 Cent is now calling himself 75 Cent now because of inflation. Liam is shaking his head. He told me not to put that in. I think I better quit while I'm ahead here. Remember, if you like what you see, like the video and subscribe. It really helps me out. And maybe send it around to your friends. Maybe they'll like it too. I'm Jim Harrington, and this is The Jim Harrington Show. Keep watching. Lots more great things coming. I'll even introduce you to my pet dog, Henry, in the next episode. Don't miss that. Liam loves Henry. And I promise next episode won't have a bunch of numbers in it like this one did. So don't miss it. See you next time.